welcome to yet another episode of Vinyl Tales, where we spin tales about vinyl. Today, I have a song for you that was very important in the career of a group that has been a big name in music ever since they started. Its origins go back to before the group was formed and draws influence from a psychedelic source, in a way. It's a haunting song that I'm sure you're familiar with by a group whose name you just can't help but get a peaceful, easy feeling from. So enjoy today's episode of Vinyl Tales. In the fall of 1969, a man named Bernie Leadon joined up with a band led by Graham Parsons, formerly of the Byrds from the 60s, called the Flying Burrito Brothers. While a part of this band, Bernie played the lead guitar. This band never really got all that much attention. At concerts, the crowds would be rather peaceful the entire time, and their albums would remain at the bottom of the Billboard 200, assuming they make it on there to begin with. During his time with the Flying Burrito Brothers, at one point Bernie started writing a new song. At this time, the Flying Burrito Brothers were known for a different kind of country rock, and so Bernie's new song was, of course, going to be in that style. Almost 2 years after having joined this band, Bernie Leadon left the Flying Burrito Brothers in late summer of 1971 after the group's commercial failure had gotten even worse. By the time that he left, all Bernie had of this new song that he was writing was just a cool new riff. After leaving the Flying Burrito Brothers, he joined up with Linda Ronstadt as a member of her backing band. He performed as part of her backing band during her summer tour that year, where she was promoting her new Silk Purse album. While on tour, the members of Ronstadt's backing band approached Linda with an idea. Glenn Frey, Don Henley, Bernie Leadon, and Randy Meisner had all been talking amongst themselves and had decided to form a band together. Later, rumors have appeared that Linda Ronstadt herself arranged for the four men to be brought together so that they could form a band together. A few months later, in September 1971, the four men were signed to Asylum Records. When they were first signed, they hadn't quite come up with a name for their group just yet. And before this, the label sent them out to Colorado to develop as a band. They still needed to figure out what they were going to do, which direction they were going to go, what kind of music that they were going to decide that they were going to play. While they were out there, they ran into the guy that they would eventually convince to produce their first album. They tried multiple times to get him to finally agree because they thought he was rather talented. At this point, he had already produced albums by famous groups like the Rolling Stones and Led Zeppelin. With no official name yet, they performed their first show in October 1971 using the name Teen King and the Emergencies. Even though the origins of the name vary from person to person, because depending on which member of the band you ask about it, the story is drastically different. They decided to name the band Eagles after an outing in the Mojave Desert. During this time, being late fall, early winter of 1971, Don Henley was living in a house near the Hollywood Bowl with a friend of his. One day, Bernie Leadon came over to hang out. While he was there, he started playing that riff that he had conceived during his time with the Flying Burrito Brothers, but he never quite finished. According to Henley, he described it as a strange minor key riff that sounded similar to the Native American music used in Hollywood movies. The kind of scene that he used as a description is from the old westerns where the Indians are riding up on the ridge alongside a wagon train that's traveling down below underneath. That's the kind of scene that he used to describe the sound. It had a haunting quality that Henley thought was kind of interesting. So they recorded a rough version of it onto a cassette tape and left it with Henley so he could see about some lyrics. This story is just getting started, so hang out with me for a little bit. A little while later, Henley came down with the flu and ended up developing a very high fever, which caused him to become semi-delirious. When his fever would subside, he would pick up the book he was reading and keep on reading it. The book in particular that he happened to be reading at this time was a biography about the life of Zelda Fitzgerald, the wife of author F. Scott Fitzgerald, who you may know from The Great Gatsby. While coming up for the lyrics for the song, Henley would base the character in the song on a mix of both Zelda as well as amorphous pictures of girls that he had met at the Whiskey A Go Go and Troubadour nightclubs there in West Hollywood. Zelda Fitzgerald was the muse behind her husband F. Scott Fitzgerald. She was known to be wild, bewitching, and a mesmerizing flapper during the Jazz Age and the Roaring Twenties. In the story The Great Gatsby, Zelda is thought to be the woman that the character Daisy Buchanan is actually based on. Now, a quick side note, a flapper was a subculture of young women after the end of the First World War and through the 20s. They wore knee-high skirts, which was considered short at that time, styled their hair in what was called a bob cut, listened to jazz music, and they flaunted their disdain for prevailing codes of decent behavior. To summarize it, they were pretty much the rebel woman of the time. If you want to learn more about what a flapper was, simply look the term up on Wikipedia. There's actually a pretty long page that talks all about what they were like. But back to the story. Apparently, Zelda Fitzgerald not only had to deal with her husband's alcoholism, which he struggled with, but also had some mental health issues as well, and ended up spending time in psychiatric hospitals because of it. Some of the lyrics in the song are connected to this. They're connected to her time in the psychiatric hospital. Starting with the line about a silver spoon. That line has to do with her time in a psychiatric hospital and one of the procedures that they did there, which has since become illegal in the United States. Henley wrote this song in a way to try to portray the woman not as devil-like, but more seductive instead. He told Rolling Stone magazine later that one of the girls that fit the term witchy woman was the roommate of a girl he dated back in the early 70s. He said that she practiced white witchcraft, which is someone who dabbles in the paranormal and in witchcraft, but with good intentions. He thought that it was charming and seductive, but he never actually took any of her white witchcraft seriously. If you want an example of a white witch, just go watch Scooby-Doo and the Witch's Ghost. Another author that Don Henley took inspiration from for the writing of this song is a man named Carlos Castaneda. Carlos wrote multiple books on shamanism and altered states of consciousness in the late 60s and early 70s while he was studying anthropology at the UCLA. Now, if you've been paying attention to what I've been talking about, it's quite possible that you've picked up on what I've chosen for today. Written by Bernie Ledon and Don Henley, and released on August 1st, 1972, as the second single from the Eagles' self-titled debut album. The song that I chose for today is called Witchy Woman. The Eagles recorded Witchy Woman in London in February of 1972 and released it first on their debut album in June of that year. The music was composed by band member Bernie Ledon during his short time with the Flying Burrito Brothers. Later, he played that music to fellow Eagles bandmate Don Henley, who took the music and during a time when he was very sick and semi-delirious because of his illness, wrote the lyrics for the song. He based the character in the song on multiple references, but mainly on F. Scott Fitzgerald's wife, Zelda. Henley read a biography about Zelda during the time that he was sick, where he pulled the information from. The success of the song, making it up to number 9 on the charts and surpassing their first single, Take It Easy, was what kick-started not only the Eagles' career in music, but it also helped to start a separate songwriting career for Don Henley. As haunting as this song may sound, it's actually a pretty good song. However, its origins are, in a way, just as twisted as the song itself is. Without Linda Ronstadt hearing some guys practicing music and thinking that they would sound good together as a band, the Eagles most likely wouldn't have happened. And if Don Henley never met Bernie Leadon, then he wouldn't have gotten the chance to help write Witchy Woman, and Leadon's incomplete riff might have turned into a completely different song that may or may not have been as good. Witchy Woman has appeared in TV throughout the years, which can be attributed to its tom-tom backbeat mixed with what's described as an eerie hoodoo touch, making it a rock ballad that just appeals to everyone. One of its appearances it's made is in a 1996 episode of Seinfeld. In the episode The Check, the character Elaine is trying to connect with her boyfriend, who is obsessed with the song Desperado by the Eagles. She suggests to him that they make Witchy Woman their song as a couple, but he rejects the idea. It's also used in the episode titled In the Woods from the TV series Cold Case from the early 2000s, which is set in the same year as the song's initial release, 1972. And finally, if you have watched the movie America's Sweethearts with Julia Roberts, Billy Crystal, John Cusack, and many other great actors, there is a scene in the movie where one of the actors is getting out of a limo. While she is getting up and out of the limo, Witchy Woman by the Eagles is playing in the background. But that's all that I got for you today. If you like this story, or if you've got any other cool stories or interesting facts about songs or albums, let me know, and I will look into them. And in the meantime, like, comment, subscribe, do all that fun stuff. But I am Brandon. This has been Vinyl Tales, where we spin tales about vinyl. And I will see you in the next one. Until then, have a good day.